Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone from where you're joining us today, and thank you for joining us for today's workshop. My name is Nicole Mulako, and I'm going to be the moderator of today's session. And we are happy to have all of you here and work closely with the Burundi Research Council in organizing this workshop and together with our partners, Digital Science. So we have a good session planned ahead for you. I'm just going to take you through the program in a bit of what is coming up. So we're going to have some opening remarks from Ms. Joy Wango and also Professor Zachary. And then we're going to have our first presentation from Professor Tetian Masharubu from the East Africa Science and Technology Commission. And then we'll have a presentation from Dr. Leslie McIntosh on research integrity trust markers. She's from Digital Science. And then we'll have Ms. Maria Zalm, who's the team manager of publication ethics at PLOS, and she's going to be talking on research integrity in scholarly publishing. And then we have Mr. Johansen Obanda, who's going to take us through strengthening research integrity and trust through persistent identifiers and scholarly metadata, and he's from Crossref. And then our last presentation of the day will be from Mr. Ivan Oransky from Retraction Watch, and he's going to be taking us through retractions on the rise, but not enough. So that's a bit of a rundown of the session of today. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat and we will address them to the best we can. And I look forward to a productive session today and engagement with all of you all. So to quickly go over through this to some bit of house rules, please ensure that your videos and mics are off unless asked otherwise, so as to not interfere with other people's presentation. If you have an urgent question, just raise your hand and we'll be able to pick it up, or you can just type it in the chat and we'll address it. So to begin today's session, I'd like to welcome Ms. Joy Owango, who's the Executive Director of the Training Center in Communication, to give us a bit opening remarks and also take us through what this program is about and why we are working with the Commission on this. Welcome, Ms. Joy.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Welcome, everybody. We are truly excited to host today's workshop on research integrity for the academic community in Burundi in partnership with the Research Council and also the East African Science and Technology Commission. Now, this is really important to us because it's part of the open science advocacy activities that we are hosting and conducting in sub-Saharan Africa. And we are truly grateful for the cooperation that we've had from the government of Burundi in putting this workshop together, as we look forward to working closely with them in adopting and advocating for open science principles within the science and technology policies. So it is both an honor and a privilege to welcome you to the Burundi National Research Integrity Workshop on behalf of TCC Africa. We are deeply grateful to convene this important national engagement in collaboration with the Commission Nationale de la Science, la Technologie et l'Innovation, and our valued partners at Digital Science and PLOS. Today's workshop comes at a very important moment, not only for Burundi, but for the African research ecosystem as a whole. Across the continent, governments, universities, and research institutions are increasingly recognizing that research integrity is no longer optional. It is fundamental to building credible, competitive, innovative, and globally connected research ecosystems. As Africa strengthens its scientific output, expands postgraduate training, increases international collaboration, and invests in digital research infrastructure, there is a growing need to ensure that research is conducted responsibly, ethically, transparently, and with accountability. For Burundi specifically, the national priorities around strengthening higher education, scientific innovation, technology development, and evidence information policy making make research integrity especially important. As the country continues to invest in research capacity building, university development, regional collaboration, and knowledge production, ensuring the credibility and trustworthiness of research outputs becomes essential to national development. Research integrity supports the several strategic priorities that are increasingly important to governments and institutions across Africa, including, not limited to, improving the quality and visibility of national research output, strengthening institutional credibility and international partnerships, enhancing trust in science and evidence-based policymaking, promoting responsible management of research data and scholarly publications, supporting innovation ecosystems and knowledge transfers, protecting researchers, students, institutions, and communities from unethical research practices, and finally, building stronger ecosystems for both graduate supervision and mentorship. We are also meeting at a time when the global scholarly publishing ecosystem is undergoing rapid transformation. The rise of open science, open access publishing, digital repositories, preprints, persistent identifiers, AI tools, and data-driven research systems is fundamentally changing how research is produced, shared, evaluated, and also preserved. These developments create enormous opportunities for African researchers and institutions to increase visibility, collaboration, and research impact. However, they also produce new challenges that require strong research integrity frameworks and institutional preparedness. Across scholarly publishing today, we are seeing increasing discussions around publication ethics and predatory publishing, which we are going to have an in-depth on that from one of our partners from PLOS. Responsible authorship and contribution, data transparency and reproducibility, where we are going to get more information about that through our partners at Crossref, research assessment reform, peer review integrity, ethical use of AI in research and scholarly communication, plagiarism and citation manipulation, open data governance, responsible stewardship, and protection of indigenous knowledge and community rights. These are just some of the conversations that are becoming increasingly important because research today is more collaborative, interdisciplinary, digital, and globally interconnected than ever before. At the same time, open science continues to gain momentum globally and across Africa. Institutions, governments, publishers, and funders are increasingly advocating for research systems that are more open, inclusive, accessible, interoperable, and equitable. The UNESCO recommendation on open science has further accelerated discussions around equitable participation in global knowledge production, particularly for researchers and institutions from the global south. However, open science can only succeed when it is built upon strong foundations of trust, ethics, accountability, and integrity. Open access without integrity risks misinformation. Open data without governance risks misuse. AI without ethical oversight risks compromising scholarly credibility. And increased publication pressure without responsible research cultures risks weakening the quality of scientific outputs. This is why research integrity and open science must move together. The Africa Research Integrity Project was established to respond to these evolving realities. And since 2024, we have spearheaded this project in partnership with Digital Science and corresponding partners. And the initiative seeks to strengthen awareness, institutional capacity, policy dialogue, and multi-stakeholder engagement around ethical and responsible research practices across the continent. Since its launch, the project has successfully convened national engagements in Ethiopia, Kenya, Morocco, and Uganda, and not forgetting Ghana. Each country engagement has revealed both unique national priorities and common continental challenges, including the need for stronger institutional policies, greater awareness among researchers and postgraduate students, improved editorial and peer review systems, clear guidance on emerging technologies such as AI, and stronger collaboration between universities, publishers, librarians, policymakers, and research support offices. We are therefore particularly pleased to extend this initiative to Burundi through the support and partnership of the CNSTI And today's workshop marks an important milestone in strengthening national dialogue around ethical scholarship, responsible research practices, and sustainable research governance in Burundi. Importantly, this workshop also creates a valuable opportunity to position Burundi within broader continental and global conversations around open science, research visibility, digital scholarly infrastructure, and responsible innovation. We therefore look forward to the important conversations that will emerge today around policy development, institutional capacity building, editorial standards, ethical publishing, responsible use of AI, data governance, and strengthening Burundi's research ecosystem for the future. Allow me to sincerely thank all our speakers, institutional partners, collaborators, and participants for your presence, your expertise, and your continued commitment to advancing responsible, ethical, and impactful research across Africa. Your participation today reflects a shared commitment to ensuring that African research is not only visible globally, but also trusted globally. With those remarks, I wish you all a productive, insightful, and impactful workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Joy, for the kind remarks. And I hope you've all now gotten an understanding to why we are doing this initiative and why it's very important. I'd like to welcome Professor Zachary Miburo, who is the Permanent Executive Secretary of the National Commission for Science, Technology and Innovation, Burundi. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, dear Nicole. Distinguished guests, respected researchers, university leaders, policymakers, development partners, students, if they are, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and welcome to the Burundi National Research Integrity Workshop. It's a great honor to open this important gathering dedicated to strengthening integrity, ethics, transparency, and excellence in research across Burundi. Today's event brings together scholars, institutions, government representatives, and partners who share a common vision, which is the following: building a research culture grounded in honesty, accountability, and public trust. Research plays a critical role in national development. It informs policy, improves healthcare, advances education, strengthens agriculture, and drives innovation. However, the value of research depends not only on discovery, but also on integrity. Without ethical conduct, reliable methods, and responsible reporting, research cannot effectively serve society. This workshop provides an opportunity to reflect on the principles that guide responsible research practices, including ethical review, data management, authorship, plagiarism prevention, mentorship, and scientific transparency. It is also a platform to discuss the challenges faced by researchers and institutions while identifying practical solutions that support quality and credibility in research. Burundi has enormous academic and scientific potential. By promoting research integrity, we strengthen our institutions, increase international collaboration, and ensure that knowledge produced in our country contributed meaningfully to national and global progress. I would like to express sincere appreciation to our all organizers, partner institutions, speakers, and participants for your commitment and contribution to this initiative. Your presence demonstrates the growing importance of research integrity within our academic and scientific community. I encourage everyone to engage actively in the discussions, share experiences openly, and work together toward sustainable strategies that will strengthen ethical research practices in Burundi. With these remarks, I officially welcome you all and wish you productive and inspiring deliberations through the workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Zachary, for those kind remarks. I believe now we've both heard from the partners and we can move ahead with the session to giving you an understanding of what to expect and why all this is important. So I'd like to welcome Professor Tetien Masharubu from the East Africa Science and Technology Commission, and he's going to be talking to us on the topic on towards fostering research integrity and responsible conduct for research in Burundi, promoting ethical standards for sustainable development. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nicole. Yeah, allow me to share my presentation. Okay, my presentation is on promoting ethical standards for sustainable development with a focus on Burundi, where we intended to foster research integrity and responsible conduct of research. I work for the moment for the East African Science and Technology Commission, and I'm the former Permanent Executive Secretary, National Commission for Science, Technology, Burundi, and also professor at the University of Burundi. Yeah, my presentation is outlined as follows. I have touched at my background briefly. I moved to the introduction to research integrity. What are the current challenges in Burundi? What about the strategic approach to fostering research integrity? And also, what I touch also on promoting responsible conduct of research before concluding. Yeah, for my background, I will not spend a lot of time on it, as I have briefly introduced me. Okay. As an introduction, research integrity may be defined as active adherence to the ethical principles and professional standards essential for the responsible practice of research. So, ensuring credibility, reliability, and the ethical soundness of research is vital for scientific progress and societal trust. Globally, countries worldwide are strengthening framework to uphold research ethics and fostering sport innovation. In our country context, I mean Burundi is expanding its research capacity. This is witnessed even by the number of higher education institutions and the new faculties or institute being opened. So establishing a culture of integrity is essential for sustainable development and international collaboration. This is a very important. This is also a very good point for Burundi to strengthen its research landscape. We have a number of challenges. Among others, we have limited awareness and training on ethical research practices. Even in terms of policy, we noted absence of clear policies in regard to research ethics. Also another challenge is the risk of misconduct of research, and potential issues include data fabrication, plagiarism, and unethical treatment of research subject. Now, yes, we have access to some plagiarism check tools, but now as we are at the era of AI, I mean artificial intelligence, we have also to have an eye on this in order to tackle this issue of plagiarism and strengthen the ethical principles. Another challenge is also the monitoring and evaluation of research conduct in terms of weak oversight structures. Of course, we are not starting at zero. Burundi has a number of legal instruments and even institutional framework. To name some of them, yeah, we have, for statistics, we have a presidential decree that institutes the statistics visa and also the ethics, but this is limited to biomedical research and behavior research in Burundi. And the decree is dated 2013, and later in 2019, a team has been nominated by a presidential decree to handle the issue of ethics, but only for biomedical research and behavior research in order to protect human and animal participants. We have also, yes, some other organizations like the Professors of University of Burundi Association, but maybe we may find behind, yes, a social connotation, but also they deal also with ethical matters. I know we have also for the Ordre de Médecins, for medical doctors, they have also a structure. The same also for the accountant. So what about the strategic approach to fostering research integrity? Here we have to work on policy and the regulatory framework. We need to develop dedicated policies and the guidelines on research ethics integrity aligned with international standard. But I was told that now Burundi is revising its national STI policy, I mean the science, technology, and innovation policy. So it's an opportunity to incorporate in that the revised policy, in the revised policy, some provision now on research integrity, on ethics. Of course, this can also lead to the development of additional guidelines dedicated mainly on research ethics and integrity. Another strategic approach is also to build the capacities of institutions. We noted that in many of our research institutions, we don't have dedicated offices in charge of ethics or research integrity. So this is an opportunity also to set up such offices. Yeah, another strategic approach is also training and awareness. So connecting training and awareness program, both for researchers, even for students, and also for staff involved in research. Another strategic approach is also to reinforce collaboration. Collaboration is the key at regional level, South-South collaboration, or globally. Partnering is very important in this program. So, how can we plan to promote responsible conduct of research? This can be done through education and training, by also there's such a culture, by fostering a culture of transparency, accountability, and ethical responsibility. We have also the ME mechanism, monitoring and evaluation mechanism also for reporting misconduct, and this is also to ensure compliance to ethics principles. Another way also is to recognize and reward those who perform well in the research in respect of ethical conduct. Yeah, to conclude, research integrity involves above all a commitment to intellectual honesty and the personal responsibility for one's actions. So we have a shared responsibility from the remarks from the Executive Secretary, National Commission for Science, Technology, and Innovation. The audience is made up of participants from government, academic institutions, researchers, and other stakeholders, and we are all called to collaborate. I have this proposal as a vision for Burundi in line with research integrity as a research environment rooted in integrity that drives innovation and sustainable development for Burundi. This can be also aligned with the global vision of Burundi, the vision 24 as an emerging country, and in 2016 as a developed country. And the research is the key. Research, is the engine for innovation. And so, finally, next step may be to establish a national research ethics task force. Because if I turn back in Burundi, I know, for example, at the University of Burundi, in the Faculty of Medicine, they have a committee in charge of ethics, but in other structures, I'm not sure. So this is also to call upon all institutions, particularly academia and research institutions, to put in place offices in charge of research ethics and research integrity. And also, another step is to promote policy adoption by integrating or incorporating aspects related to research integrity, and also with collaboration at regional level or globally. It's important also to implement or to launch pilot training programs on research integrity. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and I cannot miss to mention that research integrity involves a commitment to a range of practices that characterize responsible research conduct. Asante sana. Back to you, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Tetian. And I think we've all gotten the message home and the strong recommendations he's given us. I think we can sit down and think about that and implement that even at an institutional capacity and at a national capacity as well. So thank you, sir, for that. So our next presentation is from Dr. Leslie McIntosh, who unfortunately could not join us live, but we will play her recording. So just give me a moment as I share it.
Hi, and thank you for inviting me to this talk on research integrity and trust markers. I'm Leslie McIntosh. I'm the VP of Research Integrity and Security at Digital Science. And apologies that I couldn't make it live today, but I ended up in a time zone that was very much not conducive, unfortunately, to speaking live. So please accept my apologies. So, as I mentioned, I'm Leslie McIntosh. I work at Digital Science, but I've also been a professor at Washington University School of Medicine, worked for an NGO, the Research Data Alliance, and founded my own company, Repeta. So I am an academic turned entrepreneur and very much interested in research integrity and how we trust and actually mistrust science. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to walk through how we look at overall African publications, about looking at how we trust some of the science, and then also some of the things that are happening in distrust and mistrust of science and research. So let's start with the overall African organization trends. There has been a significant growth in the number of publications with an African affiliation in the recent past years. In the last decade, the publication growth has more than tripled. Now, this has also happened within other continents, within other countries, which what is really nice to see is that clearly there is a global move towards publishing. What we have also seen is that if we look at the research focus of African papers, the top line in yellow is biomedical and clinical sciences. Even more so after COVID, after 2020 due to COVID, followed by then engineering in green, in which research has been steadily growing and production has gone up 50% in 5 years and clinical sciences overall, and then there's clinical sciences in purple. This table shows the publications output of African organizations ranked by highest numbers of publications. For this analysis, we used the time window between 2019 and 2021, and at the top, we see that Cairo University has more than 17,000 publications, followed by the University of Cape Town with 13,000 publications, and so forth. Now, what I'm trying to show, though, is that this is probably not that unexpected in the fact that countries with a certain population, with a certain number of research institutions also may publish more. The other thing that we want to look at is the acceleration of open access, which is very important to African researchers and Africa in general, even though there might be some regional differences between the North and Sub-Saharan Africa. The blue line shows all open access publications, which in 2018 onwards start surpassing the closed publications in green and is currently much higher than closed overall. There have been a lot of studies showing that the positive impact of open access and visibility of papers. And here, if we look at 2018, the year that OA is almost the same as closed, we can look at certain indicators like the average citation rate, the field citation ratio, and other things in publications with altmetric attention, and they are all higher for the closed portion. Particularly interesting is that the attention of open access publications is twice as much as closed access publications. So we're seeing good trends here that there's good citations, that the move towards open is working. And this is all, though, talking about, again, the population of publications that are happening. What we want to look at also, though, is beyond counting publications and to look at trust markers. Now, there's 3 main components of looking at trust, these individual elements that are important to understand, classify, and categorize trust in science. We first want to look at the authorship and understand the importance of the author first being real, existing, and then also publishing in that field. Now, we understand that also people start out in a career, and that's understandable. We just need to understand what are the trends in different fields of research for authorship to trust that that person or persons are who they say they are. And you'll understand a little bit more of that when I get to the end of the mistrust. So the next thing that we look at with publications is the transparency of the public, the research environment as described within the publication. So the author contribution statement, who did what within the research, the ethics statement, if it's called for, is the information in there of potential competing interest statement, ethical approval statements, and also funding statements. Note that this doesn't necessarily have to do with the research per se, as in the rigor of the research, but that gets into reproducibility. But the transparency is very important for the environment in which one works. And then, and only then, should we look at the potential reproducibility of the research. So do we trust the author or the authors? Was the environment of the research set up conducive to an ethical norms within the environment? And then can we potentially reproduce the research? So all of this is not necessarily always happens in rigorously and robustly within every research paper, but we are moving towards that. And we can see some really nice trends. So let's look at, first of all, or not first, but let's look at the data availability statements. So those have been required in policies from funding agencies and from publishers and supported by institutions worldwide now for a number of years. But putting a policy in place and having it in practice are two different things. So if we look at the data availability statements, and we look at a difference between high-income countries and low-income countries, what we see is on the left, the high-income countries, Italy, Korea, Germany, Spain, Australia, and so on, all cluster around each other and move towards 40% of the publications having data availability statements. Now, that is vastly different when you look at low-income countries, and notice that the low-income countries, the ones that are shining as the top 10, are all in, or excuse me, almost all in Africa, with Ethiopia and Malawi and Uganda leading the pack. Notice that Kenya is not on there, but Kenya is within the top 20 in here, still doing much better than most of the high-income countries. So the rigor in which we're seeing this transparency within publications from African, particularly sub-Saharan African countries, is very promising. So again, we're looking at these trust markers, and what we just showed you was down at the reproducibility, the data availability statements. And this is a nice positive trend that we want to see continue. We also want to see the increasing presentation of other things like competing interest statement, ethics approval statement, funding, and the like. I want to thank my collaborator, Ann Campbell, who did the data analysis, and I noticed that I have her wrong job title on this as Technical Product Solutions Manager, but she is now a director within the thought leadership at Digital Science. Now, I want to now move over, though, to talk about from trust to threat and walk through a case of fraudulent research network and things that we want to prevent. So in particular, we're going to anchor again on trust markers, but we're going to anchor on looking at the authorship of some publications, and we're going to look at particularly the funding statement. So this started actually a number of years ago when somebody tweeted that their paper had been plagiarized. The paper was still online, the journal was silent, not replying to their emails, And I was very interested to see if we could look at the trust markers and look at the paper presented by this person in 2019 and the copied paper in 2020. Now, I'm going to show you a paper that is in this network, but not is this exact one. So bear with me on a few differences, and I'll explain that in a second. The first thing we want to look at is we want to look at the authorship. In that, do these authors appear to be affiliated with institutions? Is there anything that might bring us make us a little suspect? Nothing is going to be decided upon based upon the information that we see, but it paints an overall picture. And in this picture, the interesting thing is, yeah, they have a Gmail address, but you know what? A lot of people have Gmail addresses or use a non-institutional affiliated email address. But they do have two email addresses at hotmail.com, which is a bit unusual to be using Hotmail if you're a younger researcher, and very unusual to have two, one with a dash and one with an underscore. The other thing that is interesting about this one is in the acknowledgments, the authors concede the support by the Pharmacon Neuroscience Research Network. And in the original one, it said it was funded by this. Now, I thought this was interesting because I hadn't heard of this funder, but maybe our research database didn't have all of the funders. Maybe it was a new funder, and a funder is an organization that is giving out money, right? So that is what we were looking for. When I did a little bit of research, I couldn't find that, and I couldn't find it as a grant or anything. So then I went to look within Dimensions, which is a tool within digital science, to see if I could understand the researchers that were not part of this network and compare them to the people that were part of this network. So I looked at a researcher not in this network who has 30 years of experience and 4 years of publication, and looked at the publication network. And what you see is this person is publishing at 4 years of publications, about a normal amount for someone who is more senior in the research. The second person has 20 years of experience, has 4 years of publication, and is publishing more. This also is 2020, so there's a bit more publications than normal. Whereas the researcher who was in the network was clearly somehow gaming the system and had far too many publications for 2 years of their publications, 7 years of experience. So what I'm trying to show you here is that this person had gamed the system, in fact, what we found out in this network is that there was a vast increase in publications. If you look over to the right, over 6,000 citations to 123 publications with an average citation mean of 51. This is far exceeding anything out of this research environment, this research field of research, excuse me. If we look at just an overall picture, we have 361 unique authors in this original network, and we have 29 authors without identifiers. So what does this mean? It means that these authors aren't identifying themselves with a university, with an institution. They don't have other publications, and then we question whether they should be publishing in a research journal or not. The organizations that were impacted, there's 232 organizations. There's 212 with identifiers, but that leaves 20 that don't have any identifiers at all. 3 of these institutions we know, and I call them institutions, are actually apartments or houses in parts of cities. None of them, by the way, are in Africa. None of them none of those fake organizations are in Kenya or in Africa. But there are 40 affiliated countries around the world that are impacted by this network, who have some retracted papers due to plagiarism. We have people who have gone on to get grants from legitimate funding organizations, and we don't want to see this moving forward. Because what this does is this, one, really dilutes the publications of science. It hurts science completely. And the other thing that happens is that those people who are trying to be honest about their research cannot compete with the people who are not being honest about their research. And we are being able to determine whether this is happening or not. So what I want to leave with is the three main takeaways, right? One is Africa research is increasing, and the trust markers that we're seeing within publications are also doing quite well across many African countries, and we'd like to see that continue. And I say we, those of us who are working to make research stronger and better. The second thing that we see is that the trust markers are important. And then the third thing we're seeing is that what we call trust markers, we can also see as mistrust. We can see some of the games that are being played within science that need to stop. And that's what this research integrity workshop is about, and the other work going on. So thank you again so much. I apologize that I'm not here for question and answer, but if there are any, please get them to me for the questions, and I will respond in time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So that was Dr. Leslie. So any questions you have for her, you can just put them in the chat and I will send them to her and she will answer them via email. So quickly we move over to Miss Maria Tham, who's a senior editor and teams manager, publication ethics at PLOS, and she's going to be talking to us on research integrity in scholarly publishing. Welcome, Maria.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. I'm just going to figure out how to share my screen.
Okay.
There we go. That should all be good now. Can you all see my screen?
Yes,
Brilliant.
Go ahead.
Brilliant. So thank you very much for inviting PLOS to speak here today. My name is Maria Zalm and I'm a senior editor and team manager with the PLOS publication ethics team. And today I'll be talking about research integrity in scholarly publishing specifically. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with PLOS, we are a non-profit open access publisher on a mission to drive meaningful change in research publishing policy and practice. PLOS breaks boundaries by reimagining publishing models, by removing barriers to open science principles, and by embracing diverse perspectives that help make research questions relevant and research trustworthy to diverse communities and societies as a whole. One of PLOS's goals is to advance research faster by sharing research more broadly and collaborating through improving people's access to current research. And we aim to do so through inclusivity by increased transparency and data sharing, so that research communities have access to the data that is required to carry out their own assessments as needed to further contribute to the foundation of knowledge from which we can all build. At PLOS, research integrity is at the heart of everything that we do. So over the years, PLOS has implemented industry-leading policies, including policies for research involving human participants and inclusivity on a global research policy. And I will talk briefly about those two policies in a bit. Submissions to PLOS journals are subject to numerous editorial checks at multiple points before, during, and after the peer review process. And we have a dedicated publication ethics team with editors who are experienced in investigating and following up on publication ethics and research integrity concerns, both before and after publication, and who are also involved in multiple cross-industry working groups and initiatives such as United to Act, NISO COREC, PICNIC, and several other COPE initiatives that are aimed at improving and restoring the integrity of the scholarly record. So an example of industry-leading ethics policies at PLOS that we have adopted in the recent years is our policy pertaining to the research involving human subjects. Although PLOS has always required prospective IRB approval for studies involving human participants, in recent years we have updated this policy so that we now require authors to submit their ethics approval paperwork for editorial review prior to publication. As a result of the implementation of this policy, the desk rejection rates were increased to about 30%, or were increased by 30% due to authors not having obtained the correct prospective ethics approval as is required per the journal's policies, showing that actually not getting appropriate ethics approval is a serious concern that affects research worldwide. The inclusivity in global research policy is an industry-leading policy that PLOS adopted which is co-developed with researchers, with academics from different research communities, and it requires authors, especially those that go abroad to carry out research in indigenous communities, to provide clarity around the extent to which the local community was involved in the research and whether they actually benefit from these research outcomes. And this is to prevent researchers from going to countries where maybe they'll be able to do research that wouldn't have been allowed or wouldn't have been benefited their local population, and preventing them from exploiting other communities. So for the rest of this presentation, I will be talking broader about the concepts of publication ethics and research integrity specifically, and the range of challenges that the scholarly publishing industry faces currently is vast. I could talk for hours about the different challenges. So with an eye on time, I will focus during the remainder of this time on the interface between publishers and institutes, and focus on ways that we can work together to tackle these challenges and to uphold the scholarly research. So there appears to be a mismatch in the aims of research integrity investigations, which are carried out by institutes, and those that are carried out by publishers. Whereas institutional investigations often focus on finding evidence of fraud and misconduct, where an investigation into the origin of the error and the culpability of the individuals involved is central to this inquiry. But investigations by editors, or sometimes by publishers, focuses on assessing the reliability of the published results and the article's adherence to the journal's policies, irrespective of the individual author's culpability or intent. So a journal may retract an article if they find that the findings of the study are unreliable, or that the article doesn't meet the journal's editorial policies or requirements, regardless of whether these issues with the article were the result of honest error or misconduct. And in many cases, a journal does not require any institutional input or approval from an institution to pursue a retraction. But for certain types of concerns, such as authorship and data ownership concerns, we may need institutional input to be able to resolve a case. This slide's not where I expected it to be, so I might have to go back to that in a second. So at PLOS, we group publication ethics concerns into three major pillars: scientific issues affecting individual articles or a number of articles by the same research group, issues pertaining to policy adherence and systematic manipulation of the publication process. The first pillar really involves concerns pertaining to, say, image manipulation or data fabrication, statistical analysis concerns, and methodological concerns. The policy pillar tends to involve concerns pertaining adhering to human and animal ethics policies, plagiarism, copyright, dual submission and publication, authorship, and data ownership. And concerns pertaining to systematic manipulation involve things like paper mills, authorship for sale, peer review rings, citation cartels, and many of these cases involve dozens or sometimes hundreds of submissions at the same time. In our experience investigating publication ethics at PLOS, many cases arise not due to deliberate misconduct or intent to deceive, but due to lack of knowledge of good practice and policies by researchers and students alike. However, it is important to note that honest error and lack of knowledge of best practices can still lead to an article's retraction, and therefore there is an opportunity for institutes to help support their students and staff to ensure that honest errors and misunderstandings are avoided where possible. First and foremost, by providing education and guidance to students and staff, by informing them to carefully check institutional research integrity policies and editorial policies, especially because of the different target journals of interest may have different editorial policies. And sometimes journals, especially international journals, may have stricter policies than local legislation would require. Institutions should also warn their researchers and students of too good to be true offers. For example, when they are approached by individuals who offer a swift and positive peer review process in return for authorship or payment, or even exchanging citations to one another. Particularly citations that are not relevant to the article. Furthermore, institutions can uphold the research integrity of the scientific literature by proactively reporting misconduct findings to publishers and by investigating and advising journals on issues that do require institutional input to resolve, such as authorship and data ownership concerns. Although we do understand that they may not always have the systems in place to do so, but that would also be useful for publishers to know rather than we get no response whatsoever. So, although the issues raised with submitted and published articles are not always the result of honest error, and we see many different forms of misconduct, they often have one thing in common, and that is that the offending researchers are driven by the current publisher Paris culture in academia. Specifically, the pressure to publish in order to graduate or to be considered for promotion or tenure or to be receiving big financial bonuses. These incentives that drive many of the publication ethics concerns cannot address by journals alone, and we require an industry-wide approach, especially at an institutional and at a funders level. If a researcher has to choose between not publishing and therefore not their contract not being continued or not graduating, or falsifying the data or buying fake articles and then only losing their job or their degree when they get caught, then the barrier to participate in misconduct becomes much smaller. And therefore we call on institutions and funders across the world to reconsider the ways that staff and student performance is assessed by using measures that put quality and integrity of the work over the quantity of their publications. Editors are working very hard to restore the integrity and the reliability of the scholarly record, but in the end, publishers and editors are the last line of defense when it comes to upholding the scholarly record. So here I'm going to briefly go back to that slide that showed up earlier than I expected. Here we go. I would very much like this opportunity for a brief call out to the United to Act education program that will be launched soon. The United to Act is a group that works together to combat paper mills, and they have an education subgroup that has created a training program that aims to deliver educational sessions on identifying and combating paper mill activity. They are currently recruiting research integrity officers, librarians, and people in other roles that are related to research management and scholarly communication to become trainers of educational sessions that can be delivered to their respective communities. And these programs are set up so you get trained to become a trainer. I will share the flyer, the full flyer with this. This is only a brief screenshots of the flyer that they have created, and I will share that with the organizers of this workshop to be distributed among the attendees of this program. So if any of you are interested, then you can sign up to contribute to this effort. And so my take-home message for today is that institutional support for both researchers and publishers goes a long way. So please educate your students and staff and assess their performance based on quality and integrity over quantity. Ensure that there's contact information for research integrity officers and ethics boards, and that these are publicly available so that when we have any questions, we can contact an institute directly, and so that researchers can contact you as well if they have any questions. And please communicate and collaborate with editors in a timely manner when concerns are raised. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for listening. If you have any questions or publication ethics related concerns with PLOS content, you can send that to pubethics@plos.org. And if you wish to further discuss any particular publication ethics and research integrity challenges that scholarly publishing is currently facing, then you can contact me directly and I'd be happy to discuss that further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria, for that presentation. And anyone who has a question for her, please put it in the chat and she will address it. So next, I'd like to welcome Mr. Johansen Obanda from Crossref, and he's going to be talking on strengthening research integrity and trust through persistent identifiers and scholarly metadata. Obanda, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm joining you from Kisumu in Kenya, and I'm part of Crossref's community team. And I'll be talking today about strengthening research integrity and trust through persistent identifiers and scholarly metadata. Thank you very much to the hosts, the organizers, and also the guests and audience for today. So I'll be sharing a little bit about Crossref. So our mission at Crossref is to make research objects easy to find, cite, link, and reuse. We are a non-profit membership organization and we exist to make scholarly communications better. About Crossref, Crossref goes a long way with 26 years today, and Crossref basically is an open foundational scholarly infrastructure, and we make the metadata registry available for our own services to be built upon and also for others' services as well. And about Crossref DOIs, which many organizations join for that purpose, are citation identifiers, which means that the identifiers for research output that can be cited. And a few examples are here on my screen, like grants, preprints, articles, chapters, proceedings, standards, reports, protocols, dissertations, even reviews, and more types of research output can be registered with Crossref. And I want to emphasize that metadata and relationship is equal to scholarly record and the research nexus, which mean that the scholarly record isn't just right when you register a scholarly record or members join to register their records, they just don't register the DOI for that particular record, but as well they add accompanying metadata for that piece of work, and that helps to build that research nexus or connection of research. Yeah, so just a minute. Yeah. Great. Yeah, so I want to talk about metadata or scholarly metadata. What is metadata? Metadata is basically data that provides information about other data, but not the content of the data. It basically gives structure and context. Metadata is all around us in different ways. In a digital photo, for example, the location and time. But then today we're just going to focus on scholarly metadata. And as you can see on my slide, there's basic bibliographic metadata or information, for example, that would describe a kind of output that you're registering with Crossref. For example, titles, dates, author names, abstracts, DOIs, in location URL, or where that particular article can be found. But then there's additional metadata as well that you can add to the record that you're registering with Crossref. That would include elements like ORCID IDs or affiliation, which are identified by ROR IDs and funder information as well. But you can as well add other metadata like post-publication updates, like retractions or corrections, funding information, like award numbers and the grant DOIs or relationships, and subject-specific metadata like clinical trial information. This slide here is a screenshot of an article or a landing page of an article And you can see this landing page has like a few identifiable metadata. For example, the title of this particular article, the authors are here, and then the abstract, and then the DOI information here, the date that it was published, and as well, you can find that there's a full text over here. If you and now you can see that this is the DOI that this article has been registered, and it has a DOI for it, which is a persistent link, and then you can see how the metadata is captured. Some metadata that is registered Crossref is captured in a way that is machine readable. So this is the behind this behind these articles. DOI is the metadata that is accompanying it that makes it possible for other services to use it and to as well retrieve metadata about it and to make it available in different search interfaces, making it reusable, possible by other machines and other people. For example, you can see the abstract here that exists here, and you can see the publisher information, a couple other parts like the date part, the license that is applied to it, and these are all metadata. And these are all stored in machine readable format for it to be interoperable with other systems to make it research to travel far and wide. On the scholarly record, yes. So Crossref members include any organization that produces research objects and materials. For example, the publishers, societies, universities, funders, research institutions, scholars, so they can establish a persistent record, which is tied to a persistent and unique identifier for these outputs and supply metadata about this content in an open machine readable way. And maintaining this record for the long term and adding in an important layer of the context establishes the integrity of the scholarly record, as well as ensuring it is something that can be used by the whole community to improve scholarly research for generations to come. And you can see, for example, here, there's a journal article and there is a data set. Over here, there's a conference paper, and then there's a preprint on the other side. So this journal article can be using data from a certain data set. And then this journal article can be emerging from a preprint. And as well, this journal article as well could be shared in a conference or be as a result of a conference presentation. And there's a couple other metadata around this journal article, for example, funding information, or there could be a correction about it and the other names, titles, and references. There's a preprint metadata as well, when it was the posted date, the authors, conference proceedings as well. Could be like the location of the conference, the date, and more information like that. So this is a scholarly record, and it doesn't exist in isolation because it is built out of the work of other researchers over time. It changes sometimes or gets retracted sometimes, or emerges into other forms, or is also cited. So there's the importance of maintaining its integrity over time throughout the research life cycle. And this leads into a network of entities and relationships, and we call these the research nexus. This slide shows a schematic representation of the same concept that I have been speaking about. At the center of these are all the research objects and the actors of the scholarly ecosystem, and the circle around them represents how these objects relate to each other and how they act on each other. Together, they form a rich and reusable open network of relationships connecting research, organizations, people, things, and actions. A scholarly record that the global community can build on forever for the benefit of society. And the foundation of the research nexus is metadata, and the rich and robust or more comprehensive the metadata in Crossref record is, the more value that there is for our members and the community. And these metadata powers several systems like Scopus, OpenAlex, Dimensions, and Web of Science. and many more. Yeah, it's important to note that Crossref itself does not assess the quality or the integrity of the research process. And just having a DOI is not a signal of quality. A DOI only signals that an item exists, but rather it is the metadata provided alongside the DOI that you're registering with Crossref by the members that allow the community to assess the work. Yeah, and so you can see and those metadata, for example, like reference links, ORCID IDs for authors, ROR IDs for affiliations, funding and license information, and more. Yeah, so metadata trust signals. We've heard from previous speakers about trust signals, and these are important throughout their research life cycle. For example, there's author names, ORCID IDs, for example, helps to understand who authored this work and what else have they authored. And affiliations, for example, which institutes are the authors affiliated with, and this can usually be identified through ROR IDs. And then the dates, when was the work published? Post-publication updates, for example, was the work updated after the publication? Was it retracted? Has any publishing significant change happened to this work after it was published? And then there's funding information, like award numbers and grant DOIs, like who funded the work, which is important for funders as well to assess the impact of their research, but as well just to understand a better picture of the work and the relationships. How is these related to other pieces of work? Is it a data set of something else? Is it a preprint of something else? Is it a translation of something else that is already existing? Yeah, so our role in integrity of the scholarly record. So Crossref is focused on enriching metadata to provide more and better trust signals while keeping barriers to membership and participation as low as possible to enable an inclusive scholarly record. An important distinction is that we can play a role in assessing legitimacy, for example, activities of the actors or the publishers or members within Crossref, but not in the quality or the caliber of content itself. So, and that is something that is assessed by the community and based as well on the metadata that is provided by the members. Yeah, I would like to, I'm coming close to the end of my presentation by sharing a couple other Crossref services that is accessible and available to Crossref members that as well help them in maintaining the integrity of the scholarly record. Reference linking is one. If you've looked at a research paper and towards the end of the references, you see all the citations or the references with the DOI string or link. This is a member that is adding references to the publications, and this helps them to make connections and discover new things. It helps them it is important for discoverability and reciprocity, so that they are adding strings of the works from other publishers, and then the other publishers are also adding strings of the work from these one publisher as well. Cited by is another service that shows how research has been received by the community and displaying the number of times that has been cited. So, and that's why it's important for publishers or editors to add the links of the references or citations from that the particular article that the registered Crossref is citing or is referencing. Similarity check is a service that that is accessible to members, though it's offered through Turnitin, Authenticates Turnitin, and it enables editors to assess the originality of the work before they publish it. And then Crossmark is is a button that you can find on landing pages of an article or on the PDF themselves, and it tells you if there is any change that has occurred to this particular article over time, and you can see if it's up to date or if there is any changes that have occurred, and you can see where the changes have occurred. If it's retracted, you can get to a retraction notice, or you can see if there are any other changes. For example, if maybe like there is a change in the funding or change in other metadata related to Crossmark, you can see that. Yeah, so to close my presentation, what can you do? As an editor, author, or reviewer, you need to be aware of metadata relevant in your field. So what are you assessing that you need to add metadata about? As an author, maybe you need to add information about your ORCID ID, if you have one, and maybe as well who funded your work, if your work was funded, maybe if you used equipment of a certain institution, for example. And then as an editor, you need to streamline your journal policies and encourage and collect key metadata. So working closely with your authors to find as much metadata as possible for that particular work, and add that metadata to make it good for yourself as a publisher, and as well for the author, and as well for everyone else who's going to be using that particular article. And as an author, include important metadata like ORCID ID, Aurora IDs, which is identifiers for organization that funded your work, and as well that you are affiliated to, along with your submissions. And above all, you need to submit your metadata and keep maintaining and improving it to make it much better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hansen, for that wonderful presentation. I think you've delivered the message home. Submit your metadata. And I think that's pretty much clear. Any questions for him, please put them in the chat, or we're in the last presentation. Then after the last presentation, we'll have the question and answer session. You can ask your questions there. So our last presentation of the day is from Dr. Ivan Oransky, who also couldn't join us today because he's based at in the US. So for him right now, it's pretty late, but he did send us his apologies and sent us his recording. So I'm going to play it. And then after that, once we're done with his presentation, we'll have the question and answer session, and then we'll close it there. So just a moment.
Hi, I'm Ivan Oransky. I'm the co-founder of Retraction Watch and the executive director of the Center for Scientific Integrity, our parent nonprofit organization. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be able to speak with you today about retractions and research integrity, what fields and everyone can learn from one another when it comes to these. I want to just define retractions quickly so that everyone understands what I mean when I use the term. A retraction means that a journal, a publisher, sometimes the authors or a university are saying, this is unreliable, don't rely on it. Now, that could be for many reasons, but often it's because of misconduct. That being said, retraction itself does not mean there's misconduct, does not mean there's fraud, it does not mean there's anything untoward. It could be an honest error. And I'm going to talk about some of the reasons for retractions briefly, but I just wanted everyone to know what I meant by the word retraction when I use it. So let me start by not asking you to care about retractions, but saying why I think it's important to do that. Retractions are often a signal that something has gone wrong. Now, in some ways, they're a signal something has gone right. Someone has decided to actually make a correction or correct the literature. That's very important to keep in mind. On the other hand, it means that at some point in the process, whether it was during the data collection, whether it was during the preparation of the paper, whether it was during the preparation of citation of the references in the paper, something went wrong, or the peer review process did not go as well as it should have. And so I think when you look at the various cases I've just chosen here, and I could have chosen many others, but it involves many fields, it involves many major figures, again, Alzheimer's research, cancer research. Sometimes people are harmed. A lot of funding goes into this work, and then that is wasted or used fraudulently. And I think that, if we want to think about trust in science and trust in research, it's important for people to know that there's a process for correcting the literature and that someone is looking out for problems and errors even before papers are published and before they get out into the world. So I think that it's important to care about them. It's why Adam Marcus and I launched Retraction Watch 16 years ago now. But I wanted to just talk about with you why I think that's important. Retractions are definitely growing. They've gone from about 1 in 5,000 papers about 20 or 25 years ago to 1 in 500 papers. So that's 0.2% of papers today. We think the number should be higher, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But there are two main reasons why retractions might be growing. One is that the reasons for retractions are growing. So in other words, there's more misconduct, for example. Misconduct is responsible for about 2/3 of retractions. It could also be that people are better at finding those problems, whether it's misconduct or other errors. There's much more evidence, or at least the evidence is clearer, for the second set of reasons, that more people are looking for these problems and finding them. And I'm going to talk about who those people are in a little while. But there's also some evidence that the misconduct itself is growing. And so, for example, when you see the spike in 2023 there, which has not repeated because it was due to one publisher called Hindawi. And over the course of about 18 months, Hindawi, which is part of Wiley, retracted 11,600 papers. So this is drawn from our database, the Retraction Watch database, which is freely accessible. It actually belongs to Crossref now. You can download the data and analyze it, or just learn about trends, or just learn about specific countries or authors or journals, whatever you'd want to do. And it's drawn from that. And there are about 65,000 retractions in that database now. So if you think about nearly 12,000 of them being from one publisher or in one event, that's obviously a bit of an outlier. It's also true, however, that retractions continue to grow. And even in 2025, that number is probably going to grow a bit more because we enter all of them by hand. So we're pretty confident that retractions will continue to grow, maybe quite a lot, but at least at a steady rate. And again, as a rate, not just as an actual number of retractions. We and others think that retractions should be much more common. In fact, they should be another 10 times more common than they are. Remember, I said that retractions are about 0.2% of papers. We think, based on various lines of evidence, including this really major study from 10 years ago by Elizabeth Bick and colleagues. She's a very, very well-known sleuth who finds image manipulation when she looks for it in a number of papers. At least 2% of those papers should have been retracted by now. Many of them haven't been. And so that's one line of evidence. There's other lines of evidence, which I'm happy to follow up about. But we think that the number should be about 2%, so about 1 in 50 papers. Others say it should be even higher, but we're comfortable with 2%. It won't be surprising to you to know that AI, generative LLMs, have sort of entered this field, entered the area, scientific literature. You're seeing lots of hallucinated citations. There's one estimate recently that 1 in 277, which is even more common than 1 in 500, right, retractions. 1 in 277 papers in 2026 have evidence of hallucinated citations generated by generative LLMs. And you may be familiar with this, but this is when you ask an LLM for help writing a paper, or to even write the paper, it will make up references that are close but not quite there. It has a propensity to do that. This has caused Archive, the major preprint server, to ban computer science reviews. That actually happened because of sort of general AI slop, but also they have decided to ban authors for 1 year if they have hallucinated citations, hallucinated references in their papers. And there's been a lot of discussion about this quite recently, but at the same time, AI could help to find problems in literature, and it sometimes does that. But right now, it's a bit of an arms race going from one to the other, and it's unclear who's really going to win that, if anyone. It may just be a long-term sort of conflict, if you will. I want to point out there are people who have retracted quite a lot of papers. We have a leaderboard at Retraction Watch. There's someone who's retracted more than 200 papers, several who've retracted more than 100. And it's sort of an interesting thing to look at for various reasons, but a group of people, authors, recently did an analysis of how often these papers are cited and where, and they called them super retractors, people who retract a lot more than average. And it turns out that these studies are infecting systematic reviews, guidelines, meta-analyses. So this isn't just an academic problem. It actually is having an impact on people's lives. And so I think, again, reasons to think about this and care about this, I think this is another example of that. Many fields are at risk or have been impacted by this. I would argue that any field that hasn't had too many retractions is probably because nobody's looking yet. Many countries, many fields, many universities are definitely feeling the impact of this. So I mentioned anesthesiology. That's actually the left over here, because a couple of the top researchers on the leaderboard are actually anesthesiologists, anesthesiology researchers, pain management researchers. But that is a field that recognizes perhaps before anyone. It's probably part of the reason why there are more retractions in anesthesiology. They were thinking about this back in 2008. Also preclinical cancer research. So you may have heard about this paper that was in Nature in 2012. Social psychology had a problem around that time that they started to clean up the literature. It's even happening in math, though. People for a long time said, oh, well, math is going to be immune because you don't have new data, you just are proving theorems and things like that. But in fact, there's been publishing fraud in math, and people are using what are known, for example, as paper mills, which are organizations that you're probably going to hear about otherwise today during this meeting, where people can buy entire papers, people can buy authorship of a paper, and this has I haven't mentioned this yet, but has really come about because of the extreme publish or perish pressures that so many researchers are under. Every university wants to be highly ranked. Researchers want their H indices to go higher. And so you end up with this situation where people do everything they can to get published, and often they do things that are fraudulent, like hire paper mills. And this is happening again, even in math. I mentioned Elizabeth Bick, who's one of the sleuths earlier, and she is just one example, but probably the best known example, and maybe the most prolific, of people who are looking for problems in the scientific literature. Maybe they're looking for, image manipulation, as she does. Maybe they're looking for plagiarism. Maybe they're looking for statistical problems. Whatever they're looking for, they're finding a fair amount of it, and now they're able to do something about it, which is really why you see most of these retractions happening. And these are people who are generally operating as volunteers. Sometimes they're at great risk to themselves because people don't like to hear from them. Journals are, in some cases, hiring, and more recently, they certainly are in the last several years, but journals and publishers are hiring research integrity managers to actually look for these problems. But most of the time, they're still looking at allegations that the sleuths bring to them. They're starting to find some of the problems themselves, but it's been, they've had to accept and admit that the peer review process, which is really what their business model is based on, is actually quite flawed and is highly imperfect, which many of us knew for many years, but publishers do not like to acknowledge, of course, because it is, again, their business model. So journals are doing something about this. Countries are also doing something about this. And so this is just two examples. Sometimes it's a government agency. Sometimes it's sort of related to a government agency. But these are just two examples. Again, India has been taking a couple of actions. One is that they are sanctioning universities that have high rates of retraction by lowering them in the rankings. They're taking away the citations that accrued to those papers that have been that were later retracted. They're taking them out of their citation, out of their sort of calculations for their rankings, which obviously has an impact. They're also saying that any researcher has to disclose any retractions they've had in the last 5 years. And this is easy to check because they can check the Retraction Watch database, which has, we operate that, but Crossref owns it. It's publicly freely available, and they can just check it. And there are about 65,000 retractions in the database, a fair number from India. Peru, they're saying that anyone who has had a retraction cannot get these special bonuses that are, fairly substantial. It can make a big difference to a researcher. Obviously, researchers never as well compensated as they could be. And so this is a way, and I think that this is something that obviously also needs to be looked at carefully. There are retractions for honest error, which you wouldn't want to punish people for. In fact, you'd want to maybe give them another bonus for doing that, which I'll get to in a moment. But this is a recognition that this is a problem, and that funders need to do something about it, and need to try and encourage good behavior rather than encouraging and incentivizing bad behavior with publish or perish incentives. It turns out, though, that when researchers retract papers for honest error, in other words, they haven't committed misconduct, or they have found something that maybe no one else would have found, and the retraction notice says that very clearly, they don't suffer a penalty, which they do suffer if they have committed misconduct. So the penalty, the way that this paper and several other papers have measured it, is by the number of citations they have to their work, like to other work that they've done, or to that paper, of course, as well. So that's actually a nice, I think, signal, that at least even if it's unconscious, that researchers are encouraging good behavior, or at least not discouraging people from correcting the record when nothing bad has happened, or nothing fraudulent or involving misconduct has happened. So I think that's pretty interesting, and which is why we at the Center for Scientific Integrity have created the created the Control Z Award, where we try and lower the stigma of these honest error retractions. And so this is actually a cash prize for any researchers who have corrected the scientific record on their own volition and gone out and done that themselves. We have one award for junior researchers, one for senior researchers. I encourage you to take a look at the Control Z Award. You may want to be nominated. The nominations are still open. You do have to be nominated. There's no self-nominations, but it's our way. It's one way that we're trying to encourage, again, good behavior and push back against these publish or perish incentives, even though we know that those are quite powerful. We're not going to solve this all ourselves. So thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and to share some thoughts. I'm happy to follow up with about any questions, or about any sort of issues that are related to retractions or scientific integrity, what Adam Marcus and I, and now a team, have been doing for 16 years. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Great, thank you. So that was Dr. Ivan talking on retractions, and that was our last presentation of the day. So now we go over to the question and answer bit. So if you have any question for the speakers, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand. Aside from that, we have the interactive discussion. So we have two questions for you. You can contribute inside that Google Doc. It's a live document, so we'll be able to see your answers real time. So any question or comment as we wind down the session? If you want to unmute, just raise your hand and we'll see you. Any questions, comments? The interactive discussion document is in the chat, but I'll also share it via email as well, as I'll be sending the recording. So any question, comments for the speakers? Any questions before I close the session down? So if there are no questions, I think I'll close the session. And first, I'd like to thank Professor Tatian and Professor Zachary for working with us closely to make this a success. This is not the first engagement we'll have. We'll have more subsequent engagements going forward. But I truly appreciate you, sir, for the effort you did. You collaborated with us in making this a success. I also want to thank our speakers, Maria, Obanda, and also Dr. Leslie and Dr. Ivan in absentia. Thank you for making the time to come and share your presentation. I hope I've learned something, and I hope the audience has learned something as well. This is not a one-off thing. Obviously, there are more activities to come on board, and we hope that next time when we invite you, that you'll also join us again. So thank you to our speakers for being here and for taking the time to work on your presentations and speak to the audience as well. Thank you, all of you who joined us for today's session from wherever you're joining us from. I hope that you've learned something and you're going to take something home with you. And just as a side note is that the recording will be shared after the session. So we're going to publish it and share it with all of you. And should you need any support, you have any questions, you can reach out to me via email, and I'll be happy to answer your question or forward it to the relevant party who'll be able to assist you. Professor Tetian, any last comments to represent Professor Zachary? Yeah.
No, thank you very much. I don't have any particular comments unless to thank you as the organizers and also advocate for Burundi so that they get more support in order to promote ethics research and research integrity. I submit.
Thank you, sir, and we will be in touch for the other activities as well that are to be done. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
And do have a lovely day. If you have any last minute comments for me in the chat, I'll leave the meeting room open for a few minutes before I close it down. Thank you all and do have a lovely day.
Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you too.